Hi, my name is David Clemis, and I'd like to welcome you all back to another session of One in the Spirit. It's a show that we put together to talk to interesting people within OUC and finding out what they do. So today I've got a very special guest with me, and I'd like to just start off by saying that he's no stranger to us either. In fact, we probably could say that he calls this home as well as being his new church. So with no further ado, Mike, welcome, and it's such a privilege to have you here, Reverend Michael Perreault. Do we use the stiff-necked Michael version?
I don't know. It depends if I'm in trouble or not. Joining us today are Reverend Mike Perreault. Thanks for having me on, Mike. Mike Perreault. Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Mike. Anything to help out a buddy. And the Reverend Michael David Perreault, B.A., Comparative Religious Studies, Master of Divinity, Queen's University. Yes, well, we'll see if this is actually worth my valuable time. Just go with Mike. How's that? How's that for this morning, Dave?
And welcome back, too.
Thank you.
You know, it's really great to see you back. Yeah.
It is good to be back home. I mean, I spent so much time calling this our sanctuary, our church, because I was an active participant in the life and work of Orleans United Church for quite some time. And then I went away. I went and got myself ordained and moved away. And I was gone for, I think 25, 26 years.
Wow.
And now I'm back to our church again as one of your ministers and a member of this community. Very happy to be here.
Well, and of course, this will become your forever home, right?
Well, yeah.
So, tell us where you grew up.
Born in Belleville, Ontario. I mean,
Really?
all roads lead to Belleville.
Yeah.
Somebody always knows somebody else who was born in Belleville or lived in Belleville. And my family moved to Ottawa. I believe it was 1973.
Wow. Okay.
We lived in the West End. We continued to move east to Beacon Hill, and then in 1981. We moved to Comet Glen. So that was when I started to live in Orleans. I was 9 years old when we made the move. And so, you know, those are formative years.
Yes.
Elementary school, high school, youth group at the church here. And it really felt like home. And it feels like home.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, wow. So when you were growing up, were there any influences in your youth that sort of drove you to where you're ending up here today?
A lot. It's hard to pare it down for the time that we have, but I would say my parents. I'd say my mom and my dad, raised us with Christian values of respect and love and a need and want for communal expressions of the same. We went to the Anglican church, actually, one of the ones up on Alta Vista.
Oh, yeah.
So those are my earliest memories of Sunday school. Going up there, I think it was called St. David's Anglican Church on Alta Vista.
Yes.
And then we moved. As we moved east, we were at the Anglican church that at the time was meeting at Crane Wilson.
Oh yes, okay.
Went there for a spell, and then I got into high school, and I met a friend of mine, Mike Glenn, whose family came to this church. And the rule was if we slept over at Mike's house on Saturday night, we had to go to church the next day. That was the rule. And so at those days we were in Garneau.
Right.
So I'd sleep over at Mike's house, we'd go to Garneau, we had teen church,
Yep.
Marty Stevens, Doug Burt, others who were teaching us there. And then I found myself going to church even when I was not sleeping over at Mike's house. It kind of got into my bones at that point, and I stayed.
And you were part of the youth group there at the time, too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, part of the youth group at Garneau on Sunday mornings. And then when we built this building,
Yeah.
I think it was 88 we built the building, 88, 89.
Yeah, that's when we moved in, yeah.
That's when it really started to feel like a place, like a spiritual center, like a sanctuary, like we're sitting in right now. And I can see the library right from here where we would meet every Sunday morning with Teen Church.
Yes.
And we had great leadership. Craig Bader, David Craig, Marnie, Doug. There were so many folks. who were part of my formation as a Christian, but also as a member of the church. And of course, we had the influence of Tom Sherwood, especially David Kai, our diaconal minister, who was a big part of my faith formation as well. So that's kind of how I got here.
So when did you get the call to become a minister?
During high school.
Really?
Yeah, a little early, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got to Queen's Theological College, I found out I wasn't alone in feeling that. But, you know, when you're a teenager, you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, who you are, what you're going to be.
Yeah.
And I had spent a lot of high school wanting to be a teacher. And then when I got here, we were learning about the world around us and just how spiritual communities can have a real participation in making our lives and our world and our communities better for the vulnerable, you know, more loving places. I thought, well, maybe a social worker as well. So teacher, social worker, ministry, maybe, that came to mind, and it just kind of took root. So I was already, I mean, we are all doing ministry here. All of us are. I was doing many of the kinds of things that folks in intentional ministry were doing, leading Sunday school with the little kids, but also with the teenagers, participating in youth group. At the time, we had a Saturday night service.
Oh, yes, yes.
And so I took a fairly significant leadership role in the Saturday night service and began to take more and more roles on the big church. We called it big church back then.
Yes.
You know, take more roles here. Became an elder.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a pastoral component to that as well. And it really felt good, it felt right for me. And the way it worked back then, it's a different process now. You express that call to ministry to the people in your church, and then they form a discernment committee.
Yeah.
The sermon committee met over the course of a year where they would explore that call to ministry with you. Is it a call to ordained ministry? Is it a call to diaconal ministry? Or is it a call to a ministry that isn't involved in leadership in a church? Could it be something else? So we went through that process together, and I ended up a candidate for ministry for the United Church of Canada.
Great, yeah. And then where did you attend seminary then?
Queen's Theological College.
Queen's Theological.
Yeah, in Kingston.
Yeah. So, flipping through the years, because I'm sure there's a lot of experiences you've had over those years, but for those of us who didn't know you back in the day, we did get to meet you during COVID.
Yes. Yeah, that was, I mean, it was it was an awful time. It is an awful, we're still in it. It was a traumatic time, and it was a really scary time for the church. For everybody, really, not just the church, but for our whole society. And so, like other organizations, we were trying to figure out how we can continue our work. Our work is important, and it is vital. We know that because people tell us.
Yeah.
It would be missed if it was gone.
Yeah.
Because so much of our message, so much of our gospel is about not being afraid, about intentionally including God in our lives, so that we can wend our way through whatever misfortune we might find along the way. It was just doubly so. We need to continue our pastoral ministry one way or another, but we can't do it in sanctuaries like this. So what do we do? Big question. And we found a lot of partners along the way to help us figure that out, for better or for worse. But we did come up with ways to continue to carry the gospel, and I'm very proud of what we did.
I would say so. I think that it was also, I think, a groundbreaking thing as well, being that it's something that people just weren't even thinking about, really. And it's the nexus of digital ministry.
We weren't thinking about it on that scale. I mean, you can't go through Perreault's YouTube or Instagram or even TikTok without seeing ministries happening within those. And that predated the pandemic. And I like to be with my colleagues. Quite often, well, once a month, we have lunch at Liam McGuire, Ottawa area clergy, and we have some really interesting discussions. And I thought, well, I think folks in our congregations, or even folks who aren't part of our congregations, might get something out of this as well. So I thought about a YouTube presence for Ottawa area clergy, not to replace the personal, in-person worship that we do in our own faith communities, but rather to supplement it. So I thought about a video series of just a few of us sitting around, talking about the questions of the day, matters of great import, philosophizing, theologizing, and praying together, and offering offering something to the folks out there that they might find interesting and spiritually helpful. So I actually I got as far as registering a domain name, and I still have it. I haven't used it because then the pandemic happened, but it was called icanseclergynow.ca.
It was great.
And then March of 2020 happened.
Yeah.
And circumstance forced our hand.
Yeah.
We were suddenly faced with a disaster on all sorts of levels, but one of those disasters was not being able to come together as church in a way that all of us experience as being life-giving and as I said earlier, vital in our lives.
Yeah.
How do we fulfill that need? So we got on Facebook. We started to chat in Messenger. There was a message string that involved myself and Molly and Carolyn and Eric and Pete from Mackay. And we thought, well, how are we going to support each other? What can we do together? This is a frontier not of our choosing or making. How do we continue our ministry together? And we brainstormed and we prayed and we thought and we came up with an idea, a goal, and that is to continue to have a pastoral presence, probably through video, some kind of streaming venture. But it wasn't planned yet until, well, you and David Patterson came on the scene, until there was an invitation for myself and Eric and Pete, and I think Carolyn and Molly were here too, to come into this sanctuary within the first 2 weeks of the pandemic.
Yeah.
To create together with the help of the Spirit what eventually became virtual church. And I think Molly was the one who coined the name of that. It's just perfect. Just a perfect name.
It was, and it's still known as Virch as well.
Yeah.
But you didn't come into this lukewarm at all, really. You came into it guns a-blazing, if I can say.
Well, I think all of us had our own coping strategies during COVID. And God love everyone. We all sort of, I shouldn't, maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but I think most of us, if not all of us, had strategies to get through it. So how do we stay connected with our family? How do we stay connected with our church? I suddenly was doing a kind of ministry I had never done before. Most picking up the phone, calling people, lots of emails. We were all being stretched. And I had always been, I'm an amateur photographer. You can just ask my boys. I've taken many a video of them growing up. And part of our life together as a family was to sit around after dinner and we didn't watch TV shows. We quite often watched YouTube videos. And everyone would take a turn being a YouTube video DJ. And, and I thought, well, there's something here that I think the church could learn. And I kind of drilled down on it. And as part of my coping strategy during COVID, it was to just put my energy into that, into connecting people in this new digital way. Confident that the Holy Spirit can transcend anything, that can connect us in ways that we find surprising, even through video, maybe especially through video during those days.
And of course, the new turn of phrase that we have in the United Church is bold discipleship, and I think that was really bold discipleship.
Well, you had to stretch, I think. I think you had to stretch because it's a very different medium.
Oh, yeah.
When we come to church, we are used to, we draw comfort from a certain medium that does convey a certain message.
Yep.
And it doesn't necessarily translate to video all that well.
Right.
When you are here in this sanctuary and we're live and we're singing together, you can feel the warmth of the person next to you. You're right physically there with your preacher, with your lay leaders, with your music director, with your choir. There's that relational aspect that lends itself well to the medium and the message that we convey in this mode. It's time tested. We've been doing it for 2,000 years, and people are still coming to participate in it. But attention spans being as they are, they're different live than they are on video.
Oh, yes.
Naturally speaking, humans' attention spans are shorter on video. They visually, we look for different things. With the absence of that physical presence, it changes.
Oh, yeah.
So we had to learn from the YouTube generation, the Instagram generation, about how to convey a message and that it's receivable. Mm-hmm. And that meant we had to change the way that we presented the message. And I mean, I will always affirm that COVID was and is a traumatic event. At the same time, the Spirit was at play during that.
Oh, yeah.
And so, dare I say it, we did have some fun. We had to.
Dare to say it. Of course we had fun.
We had to. So.
Well, I remember a discussion I had with Eric about this in the early days, and he said, we got to think about this worship and Sesame Street.
Yep.
And I thought about it, and then it just struck me that with Sesame Street, it was little 5-minute vignettes on a common topic, but all different. And and I remember when we first got together, the Three Amigos, I call it, and that was very special. I think people kind of got an idea. Well, this is going to be different. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to present a clip of this. Let's watch this now.
Okay. 23rd Psalm seems like a good place to begin this journey. It's something that's comfortable. It's something that is familiar. Certainly something that speaks to our communal situation, even as we exist in isolation. What really strikes me about the 23rd Psalm and the place we find ourselves in as a society and as a community of faith is that it was composed within social isolation. King David had sinned. He had committed adultery with Bathsheba. The child of that relationship died, and David spent some time in penance, in this self-imposed social distancing, in this pit. And it was in this pit that he encountered the holy in a brand new way. And out of that came this wonderful piece of literature that is echoed for thousands of years that we are still finding truth in today.
And I'd like to just explore a couple of the other things too, because one of the things that you kind of, I wouldn't say scared, but you certainly shook up my wife Elizabeth when we were shopping. Do you remember at the Independent?
We ran into each other.
Yeah, we ran into each other,
and
you were so excited about. Oh, Dave, guess what I discovered now? And, and afterwards, Liz said to me, "Who was that?" I said, "That's Mike Perreault." "Oh, that's Mike Perreault." Anyway, it was really. I think though that the after effect of this is essentially it's become necessity to do digital ministry.
I think so. It's one of the marketplaces we find ourselves in, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a town square that we find ourselves in, and to ignore it would, I think, not be fulfilling our calling to carry the gospel into our communities. Our communities are increasingly digital.
Oh yes, yeah.
So,
and as you say, the generation which is really into this, isn't that who we're trying to reach as well?
Well, I think if the medium is the message, right?
Yep.
And if the message itself is an eternal truth of love and connectiveness, of justice, radical sharing, radical wealthing, if that's the message, then we have to have it, we need to make it deliverable in a way that it can be heard. And that often means changing our changing our mediums. We always have done it. Since the printing press, my goodness, an explosion of informational
Yep.
technology hundreds of years ago.
Yep.
Can you imagine if Christianity didn't adopt the technology of the printing press, or the telephone, or the photocopy machine, or email, or the internet, or Instagram, or TikTok, or Facebook, or YouTube? If we didn't do that, we wouldn't be Christian.
Yeah, and we may not be here.
We may not be here.
Yeah.
Well, God would be here.
Yes.
But perhaps the messengers would be different.
So now we come to you coming here. What was the driver for you to come here? What were your expectations in coming here?
Oh my gosh. Wow. I had been at my previous church, Rothwell United, for 15 years.
Wow, I didn't realize that long.
It was a while. 2007 I started there. And I loved it. It felt like home. It was home. It was in Beacon Hill. I lived in Beacon Hill. My kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Carol Denny, was in my congregation. How sweet is that?
Wow.
I love that about the place. It was just in the same neighborhood when I lived from 1976 to 1981, so it felt like home.
Right.
And I enjoyed it. I really did. Came to love them. They came to love me. I've had significant experiences with them as a person, but also as a minister. And the community has gone through a lot of change and evolution over the years. It was really, really quite good. Most of the time I was ministering at Rothwell, I was living here in Orleans. When we were fixing to move in 2009, Orleans was the natural choice. You know, I knew the schools, I knew the neighborhood, great place to raise kids.
Yep.
So we came here in 2009, and we stayed. And when I heard Orleans was searching for a new minister, I took one of my walks. I walk and I bike a lot, and I went on a very early morning walk. It was Saturday morning, about 6 in the morning. I walked down from where I live in Chapley Hill North. And I walked around the church, kind of circumnavigated the church, prayed about it, thought about it, and I thought, well, you know, I think I'll write them a letter. I use the fishing metaphor. Let's drop our lines in the water and see if we get a nibble. And the next thing you know, the search committee called me and asked to get some more information from me, and we did it all through Church Hub, and here I am, and it felt right. You know, it was sad, it was heartbreaking to leave a community that I love so much, that has done so much for me personally, but it felt like the tug was to have an even more a deeper experience in a place that I call home. Professionally this time.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm glad the search committee agreed.
So now that you're here, and now that you're with us, of course, there's certain comfort that comes with this as well. As you say, you know the community, you know where we're at and that. But I understand, if I can use the contemporary phrase, you've got a side hustle.
Side march. Yes, yes, yes. I have been a civilian chaplain at the National Military Cemetery for about 10 years now. And I've always been interested in military chaplaincy and the reserve side. And so I thought, well, you know, I'll give it a go. And started making phone calls. And you know, it was delayed by COVID, but when I ended up being enrolled in the military in March of 2021 as a chaplain. And so I'm the padre for the Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa. So that big red brick drill hall that you see next to City Hall, that's where our regiment is housed. And I love it. It's very different from anything I've ever done before. I mean, pastorally, a lot of the skills, a lot of the practices do carry on. There's great continuity there, but it is a culture that I was not familiar with, and being with a lot of young soldiers is really quite. Well, it's fun. challenging.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, I think everyone, I mean, we're all walking libraries. And to be with a community that's different from my experience, I get to learn about the world in a very different way. And I've really appreciated that.
That's great. So now you're sitting here where the church writ large is going through a strategic planning. We're going to be going through the same thing here in the region, and I guess in some ways we're looking at going down different paths in the future. So where do you see us, say, in the next 5 years or 10 years? Where do you see Orleans United Church in all of this?
Involved in our community. I think Orleans United Church ought to participate and be involved in every major conversation that happens in our part of Ottawa. I think we need to introduce ourselves to the world around us and become known for our loving, caring, and giving nature. Pastorally, for sure, but also when it comes to engaging and advocating for things that are important to people of faith for thousands of years. There is a housing crisis and emergency in Ottawa. I think the church is required to be part of those conversations, to continually advocate for the vulnerable. We need to do that. This is a community. I know because I talk to people, you know, when I'm walking the dog or just down the street. It's a deeply spiritual place. It might look like a kind of a boring suburb to a lot of people, but to me it's not boring because of the people. We have many different faiths here, not just within Christianity, but Islam, Hinduism, all sorts, right here, Judaism, right here in our community. And I think we've been islands of ourselves. And in so doing, I don't think we have been as effective as we all could collectively be in being a spiritual presence. I think Orleans United Church is uniquely situated in the crossroads, in the town square, whether that be virtual or whether that be practical here, in facilitating those conversations, because I grew up in a church that was very open-minded, very open-hearted, very open-spirited, one that was continually and has been continually engaged in the community around us. That's who we are. And because of that's who we are, that's who I have become. So I do think that we can be part of the connective tissue, as it were, between the disparate spiritual communities here in our part of Ottawa. And in so doing, I think we can help introduce, reintroduce, reinforce the spiritual assets, the spiritual realities of our part of the city. I think that's what we're called to do.
And mixed with a little bit of digital ministry?
Well, absolutely, essentially. Essentially. You know, that's the primary way that people find out about things these days. I mean, there's word of mouth, sure, but it's Instagram, it's TikTok, it's YouTube. For folks who are Generation X and Boomers and beyond, it's Facebook. You know, you might think of Facebook as being the province of the young at heart, but really, you know, it's a medium that is more geared towards people who are 45 plus these days. You know, so we have to continue to explore different ways to engage, and I think also have different mouthpieces as well.
Right. And of course, as you say, our engagement as individuals, our engagement as groups of like-minded people is essential for this. We've done it, we're doing it, we continue to do it.
Yeah. It's exciting, Dave.
Oh, I can hardly wait. And it's been a real pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank
I
you.
was wondering if maybe you could do me a favor.
Sure.
Could you bless us out before we close off here?
Sure. Let's pray. Holy and gracious God, may your spirit of innovation, your spirit of play, your spirit of connection, your spirit of comfort, your spirit of history and tradition abide with us, come from us. May it enliven our time together as minister and church, as community, as your people, walking, wheeling, sitting, kneeling together to share God's love. Amen.
Amen.